There is nothing interesting about angels, chapter 2. Uninteresting, you say. It would be amazing to live with an angel, assuming, that is, you even believe such a thing is possible. It is possible and quite the opposite of amazing. It's dull, boring, if something so strange can be called boring. Consider that the water draining out of the tub these days is clean enough to drink and to act as a natural disinfectant. You'll never experience a skin infection in this house. You'll never experience a clogged pore or a rash. If you get a sunburn, it won't be there once you are out of the shower. Sounds perfect, right? How do you know that you're alive, that you are moving through time? A scar that holds a memory of a mistake and a story of healing, a blemish that your mother had in the same place, a rough patch of skin that you take the time to care for and then enjoy the results of? What if none of those things ever happened? What if your face in the mirror was the same as it was yesterday, or last year, or 6 years ago? How would you know that anything had happened if nothing ever changed? And if the water still goes down the drain, why does it matter if it's blessed? Cecilia leaned her head against the tile of the shower under the steady stream, watched the crystal clear water slip away, and wished for a hangover headache. Since Chloe moved in 6 months ago, handing over a copy of the ad asking for a quiet, clean, and respectful roommate as if it were a resume, Cecilia hadn't even had a minor sniffle to excuse her from work. She really wanted something today. Raspy vocal cords to convince whoever answered the phone that she was really ill. A slight cough, a pile of used tissue on the coffee table. She could fake it, but the last time she had tried that, when Chloe was home, she had spent the morning trying to explain why some lies were okay. Not that Chloe ever questioned her or said anything or gave any indication that she cared. It was just a feeling, like she had done something wrong, that eventually drove Cecilia out of the house and off to work a half day. Having a psychotic break was a good reason not to go to work, right? She wouldn't have to lie. Her head felt ready to burst from the pressure of insight, and the still threatening tears had actually roughened her voice enough that she wouldn't have to actually lie, just call in and let them draw the appropriate conclusion. She wanted to talk more to Chloe, but she also didn't want to. Maybe she could explain what the dream had meant, but Cecilia had a rush of fear at the thought of learning more. She remembered the paralyzing nausea that gripped her the moment everything in that chaotic realm had coalesced, and she had known with complete certainty that she was being asked to do something terrifying. Had she said no? Had she said yes? She got dressed and poured herself a cup of coffee. Her hand shook slightly, and she petulantly ignored the spilled coffee as it spread across the table's lightly grained wood. Once she would have been concerned about the beautiful bird's-eye maple that was a part of her inheritance. The cottage and its furnishings had been left to her when her grandmother passed. She turned away as the table absorbed the liquid like a sponge, leaving no evidence of the mishap. Chloe's gaze was fixed on the same wall, and she clearly wasn't seeing it. Cecilia leaned against the door jamb and waited. Usually, when she stood silently nearby, Chloe would take a shuddering breath, as if her lungs had forgotten how to, lift her shoulders slightly and raise an eyebrow to indicate she was listening. The moment stretched, and Chloe remained exactly as she was, a bizarre wax figure placed in an inane location, facing the wall instead of the room. "I'm not going to work today," Cecilia said, taking her cell phone out of her pocket. Chloe did not respond. Cecilia sighed, got her stuff together, and paused to assure herself that Chloe was actually still breathing. Did she breathe? She was still simulating breath. That was enough. At least work would provide a distraction. Maybe she could finally stop thinking about whatever it was that the dream was trying to tell her. Cecilia left the house. She walked to the SkyTrain station and dashed for a train that had just arrived as she reached the bottom of the stairs. The moment she stepped inside the closest compartment, it hit her. The smell of feces and sweat. Smells like this wouldn't travel even an inch at home. She was relieved to step into the fresher air of her stop. She walked the short distance to her office and took a long, deep breath at the entrance, pushing open the doors as she exhaled. She was instantly rewarded for her attendance with a rush of requests. Everyone needed her attention. A tablet was placed in her hands with the instructions, "Make it work." It took less than an hour for her to fully settle into the space and get lost in the routine of answering questions, closing complaints, and clearing her inbox. She was almost finished writing her monthly report when a message popped up on her screen. "Can you take a call?" She frowned, almost typed no, then wrote, "Who's on the phone and why are they calling?" She took a sip of her coffee and waited. Someone named Matthew asked for you directly and told me to just put you on. Do you want me to take a message? Cecilia saved her report and minimized it on the screen. Send the call through. Before she could take another sip of coffee, her phone rang. This is Cecilia. How can I help you today? All she could hear was a high-pitched tone. She turned down the volume, but it got louder. She winced. The sound traveled through her like light through glass. It was impossible to block or ignore. Hello, caller? Are you there? Do you have me on speakerphone? The sound crescendoed to a pitch that drove sharp pain to the base of her ears. Cecilia blindly snatched her headset off, and it clattered to the floor. The line disconnected. Cecilia had the call pulled and sent to her. She plugged in her earphones and listened. There was no high-pitched tone on the recording. Matthew introduced himself and stated that he was the store manager for store 1702, and he was returning her call. He sounded perfectly normal, polite, and professional, nothing weird. That was weird. Cecilia called the manager back, and thankfully the line was clear. He had called the customer who had sent the very nasty email that morning, and everything was resolved. She apologized for the bad connection they had before, and made notes in her notebook to follow up with the customer later that afternoon and make sure they were happy with the resolution the manager had offered. She finished writing her report and sent it off. The rest of her workday went by fast. She logged out of her phone 15 minutes before her shift ended so that she wouldn't end up on a 30-minute call, which always happens if you stayed logged in until the last minute. She tidied up her things, made notes for herself for the next day, and left the office. On her way home, she picked up some milk and cereal for the next morning and a few boxes of tea. Chloe liked tea. She would stir it seemingly absent-mindedly and create mesmerizing shapes in the milky water. It was for this reason that Cecilia always handed Chloe her tea in glass cups. The other day she had created clouds of milk that had hovered just above the rim, and she had leaned in, pressing her upper lip to the forms. Cecilia had found that mesmerizing, and had almost felt the foam against her own skin. It didn't matter what kind of tea she brought home, as long as it had caffeine. Today she was bringing home a box of Lady Grey, and she hoped her roommate would enjoy it.